Obviously, we know gentrification is something that's happening in cities across the world, but what was it about looking at it through the eyes of children that really sort of stood out to you as a way to approach this?
Well, I have to be honest, at first we had a broader, kind of original vision of, everybody in the neighborhood, including experts, urbanologists, sociologists, politicians. And when I showed Sheila Nevins, who's the legendary HBO head of documentaries, some of the casting, she was so taken by the kids that she said, you don't need any experts, you don't need any adults, do it through the kids' eyes. And I think that was a great call, because it's a fresh perspective. They're not burdened by everything that's come before. This is the challenge their generation faces. And I think the most surprising thing was that even though the worlds are so different, from where they come, there was common ground in a place that I don't think we anticipated. I mean, obviously the popular culture, music, movies, sports, is all shared, but the anxiety about where they fit in to what's coming next, to the future, which they see changing so rapidly right in front of their eyes. Both sides of the street felt that. The more privileged kids were aware that it's no longer competing with Riverdale and Fieldston. Now they're competing with the Chinese, the Koreans, the Indians, the Russians. And the kids from the projects, are aware that we as a society, the very idea of public housing seems, kind of out of favor. And the commitment to some kind of social safety net, seems to have lost traction. So they're worried about what's going to happen to their families, their moms, their grandmoms, their aunts and uncles. That was a surprise. And I think that at the same time, the spirit of young people, the energy of young people, the curiosity to know each other is something that makes the film, even though it's got a lot of these subjects that you just mentioned, it makes it something that draws you in.
And not just casting students, but casting the school itself. What was the process like for narrowing it down to avenues?
Well, that made the film. Look, I give Chris Whittle credit. He's somewhat of a controversial character. He took a risk. He's someone that enjoys the limelight. I think that was part of it. And he wanted to bring attention to the school. It was only 2 or 3 years old when we started. But I'll be honest with you, getting into an elite New York City private school, I would say it's as hard as getting into the CIA or death row, 2 places that I've been and filmed. This was as tough. Because there's some, let's just say, very wealthy, powerful parents or, that might not be comfortable with something like this and are going to throw their weight around. So I give the school and I give Chris a lot of credit. I don't even know if he's seen the film. But that's really what made the film, is that we were able to get in. And I think one of the reasons was, Steve, as we were talking earlier, I've lived in this neighborhood, I don't even want to admit how long, for 4 decades. And my kids went to Hudson Guild. Whoopie Goldberg's mom was their first instructor. Whoopie grew up in those projects. So I've seen this neighborhood change, and I could honestly say to some of the families at Avenues, to the administrators, look, when I moved into my loft, I was, I guess, what would be called an urban pioneer. I moved in with a bunch of freaks, and there was no heat on the weekends. There was a garment factory upstairs and downstairs, but we didn't care. Then, 10 or 15 years later, when I became domesticated, and my wife moved in with me, and we started a family, I remember when my wife's mother came for the first time. She started crying. She couldn't believe her daughter ended up in a factory on 26th Street. Now, if she was still alive today, she'd see there's a Hilton Hotel literally 3 buildings down, a Holiday Inn at the other side. It's just changed so radically. So what I'm saying is that I was able to present to the families and to the administrators that, look, I've seen it from all sides. And now I'm at the other end of the cycle where my studio, which is at the end of 26th Street by the Hudson River, I only have a few years left, and there's no way I can afford, to keep my operation, my company in this neighborhood, because of everything you just saw. So, I'm facing as the woman, who got emotional and who is afraid that she may be displaced and have to leave her home. I'm facing the same decision that, it's going to be difficult to stay, certainly in Chelsea, if not, Manhattan, anywhere. So I think that I could come and say, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've been, the pioneer, the so-called creative class gentrifier, and now potentially the displaced. I've seen it from different perspectives. And we're not here with an agenda just to make you look bad, because you are the wealthy or you have privilege. We're not coming with that agenda. We're coming to capture a moment. And in a way, it's like a sweet spot because there still is a mix in the neighborhood that keeps it vital, that makes it, in a way, a vanguard neighborhood, a neighborhood that at least is going to try to figure out how do you manage these forces, these changes in a sane way. It's not easy. And now I think the school, to its credit, is becoming more involved in that dialogue. And I think the students, in many ways, are the ones that push the school. And in many ways, Yasmin's effort was kind of like, it took students to cross the street and say, hey, we want to get to know each other, for the school and the administrators to follow.
And it seems like if there is an agenda, it's that there's value in going across the street and talking to people that you don't necessarily know and finding that common ground, not necessarily in any sort of greater sense of activism, although that is an option, but just the idea that like you said, a dialogue that's what you can take away from something like this.
Think about what you just said. I mean, given the larger political paradigm we face, with Trump on one side and Clinton on the other side, and those two sides unable even to talk to each other. So you're right. I mean, the ability to just have a dialogue, and especially for young people to learn to talk to people that are different, that come from different cultures, different places, different economic backgrounds, it's absolutely essential. Because look, this is their challenge. You've got, okay, climate change, certainly, but how to make this global capitalist consumer economic engine work for more people and not just produce a new aristocracy and everybody else like living in serfdom. That is the challenge. The irony is that in this political campaign, actually, certainly during the primary season with Bernie Sanders on one side and Trump on the other, you did hear this refrain that the system isn't working, it's rigged, it's only delivering for the very, very top and not for everybody else. So there is a mainstreaming, but in terms of any solutions or any real in-depth dialogue, in many ways, that's what these kids are growing into, and that is going to be part of their lifelong challenge.